Gangemi.
Dominic, here
Not
we are.
guilty.
Frank Gangemi, Dom Crispino, and this is Justified, the podcast hosted by two ex-lawyers who are also two ex-cons. Same guys.
Yes.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. How about you, Frank?
Good, good. This is an inaugural podcast. We're going to be getting into the hot topics, the hot legal topics of the day, and Dominic and I come from a unique perspective on all of them, being former attorneys and former defendants and former convicts. There is no one that will give you the analysis that we can because we've seen it from all sides. Correct?
Yes, and it's not just attorneys serving time in like little namby-pamby places. We saw some pretty hard time, so
That's right.
we know exactly how it is.
No Camp Cupcakes.
No.
I bounced off Sing Sing for a minute. You bounced off Clinton, otherwise known as Dannemora, for a minute. You bounced off Rikers for a minute. I bounced off the Brooklyn House of Detention. When we say bounce off, we did years in these places.
Yes.
We got to meet a lot of colorful characters. We got to learn a lot, especially about ourselves. So here we are, and this is a news hotbed these days. Political vitriol, legal vitriol. There's just too much information, and there's not enough real analysis of it. Getting a lot of crap out there. Everybody wants to be a legal beagle, and they give it to you from usually a biased perspective. You and I will not do that.
Yes, the beagle is a dog, by the way.
This is correct. We pay no masters. We don't pay homage to anybody. We call it like we see it, and if you don't like it, don't listen.
Yes, and we don't have licenses to lose, so
This is correct.
we have nothing stopping us
We are
from
not
telling you the
violating
truth.
any ethics.
Yes.
Okay, although we are somewhat ethical now, I will believe. All right. Dominic, let's get started at the beginning of the beginning. Donald Trump is in the news. He's always in the news. He's been in the news for 8 years, ever since he just threw his hat in his ring, and nobody thought he was going to win anyone. But here we are, 8 years later. He's starting term number 2. And right before his inauguration, we've had a couple of interesting developments. Number one, he gets sentenced by Judge Juan Merchan, Manhattan Criminal Supreme, gets sentenced, I believe it was about a week ago. I mean, we're doing some time here. The timeline is about a week ago. He gets sentenced to an unconditional discharge for, as Alvin Bragg likes to say, 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. What do you think?
What do I think? Well, I don't think much of the case. I never thought much of the case. And the sentence of an unconditional discharge is, a rarity. An unconditional discharge means, hey, you're convicted, no penalty. Just go on your way. You're a convicted felon. I suppose that was the whole point, that Trump is now a convicted felon. But from the Trump perspective, this had to happen, despite the fact he fought it and tried to figure out an end run around it. In New York, you need to be sentenced in order to go forward on an appeal. So now he can appeal the conviction and get it thrown out. Now, it may take a while because now there's no longer impetus at this point. His attorneys will probably file briefs very quickly if they wanted to. And, the odds of this conviction surviving are pretty small.
Yeah, I think the case is a shit pile. Let's call it like we see it. The case is garbage from the moment they created it. The feds wanted nothing to do with it. Alvin Bragg, who basically ran on prosecuting Trump, just like Fannie Willis ran in Georgia on going after Trump, he took a case that was a dead dog. The feds didn't want. He dusted off a statute of limitations and told it. He then dusted off created a novel theory of law and rammed it down the throats of a grand jury, a very liberal grand jury in New York. He knew he was getting the indictment. He got it. They found a very friendly judge in Juan Merchan, whose daughter raises millions of dollars for the Democrats. And presto, they've got themselves a conviction. And like you said, to your point, Trump was fighting this sentencing, and I agree with you. There was no reason to fight it. I think he just did it as a matter of perfunctory. He just did it as a matter of process. But at the end of the day, the unconditional discharge is what resonates to me. It's a nothing burger. It's just a doubling down on the original conviction, saying, all right, the conviction is official, it rubber stamps it, and nothing happens. No penalty, no money, nothing.
For all the attempts to use lawfare, for lack of a better word, against Trump, it kind of just petered out. If you think about it, you have the special counsel's case, which was always the strongest case, the one in Washington D.C.
Yeah,
And I said in a previous conversation we had, a number of previous conversations, I said on other shows that that was the one to fear for Donald
That was
Trump.
the documents case, the classified documents
The
case.
documents case, yes. It seemed
No, was it the election case? I'm sorry.
The documents case was
In Florida.
Would have been a strong case, but he found a favorable judge.
That's right.
But the quote insurrection case, where they didn't charge it with insurrection,
That's right.
it was probably the strongest one, and I fear that I feared at the time that given the locale of the case in the District of Columbia federal court, the type of jury you would get, and the type of judge he drew, an Obama appointee who was like pretty much determined to convict him, it looked like. If he lost that case and then lost the election, may very well have spent the rest of his life in prison.
Yeah, that was.
And I don't know if an appellate court would have ever saved him on that. So that was the case to fear, and he dodged that one.
It's funny you said the favorable judge. Prosecution finds a favorable judge, favorable forum. As this show goes on, we're going to talk a lot about that. The gamesmanship in the legal process, it's such a tremendous advantage or disadvantage as to where a case is being tried. And you and I know that firsthand. And people don't realize how different it is.
Yes.
To be tried someplace like Washington, D.C., as opposed to Florida.
My own experience. I mean, I had a case brought against me which was brought in Brooklyn, but the facts occurred in Staten Island, which is another borough in the city, and no way Staten Island would ever have brought a case against me.
That's right.
So, where it's done and who the judge is. Now, people would think that a judge is like randomly drawn, but it's really not. I mean, basically, like for example, in New York, whoever the judge is who supervises the grand jury, that is who does the legal aspects of whatever the grand jury requires. He doesn't instruct them or anything. Right. The DA does that. That judge is the one who then gets the case. So a prosecutor can wait until a certain judge is supervising the grand jury or a certain grand jury, and then bring the indictment right there. And now they have a judge. That's Manhattan right. was famous for this,
and they're still famous for it
for many years.
The reality, in theory, cases are drawn on a wheel. There's a randomness to it, but not so much. I mean, and just as an example, getting back to Trump for a minute. Juan Merchan was the guy that handled the Trump case. Not so inconspicuously, he was also initially assigned to the Steve Bannon case, which we will talk about in a minute.
Yes.
And then he got off it because it started to look like a pile-on. So there's a different judge now handling the Bannon case. But initially, it was Merchan who had the Bannon case and had the Trump case.
And also had the case of the Trump's controller, who was... his name escapes me right now, but the cases they brought against him, and he did what, 6 months, then 6 months again on Rikers Island.
So think about that.
He got the special deal.
Right, he got the bonus plan. The same judge, when you're supposed to have an element of randomness to assigning cases, the judge, what cases get to what judge, he miraculously got all three cases that had anything to do with Trump or his little people.
Was it Alan Weisberg?
Yes, it is. That's exactly right. So think about that. That's a little bit suspect.
Yeah, the same judge running through it. Now, from all accounts, Judge Merchan, in outside of the Trump world, had a decent reputation with defendants. Supposed to be overall a pretty decent judge, not a killer sentencer. Like years ago, they had like the four hitters in Manhattan. Right. They had Judge Leslie Snyder, you had Charles Solomon, and then there were others who filled the other two roles. But basically, if they put you in that world...
They were Hang'em Harrys.
Yeah, you know you were getting slammed.
Well, Wexler?
Yes.
So we have the Trump lawfare now coming to a conclusion because he's now going to be inaugurated in a week. You mentioned something a minute ago. You mentioned Jack Smith. Jack Smith, who just resigned, dismissed the cases because the DOJ policy is they don't go after, they can't continue to prosecute a sitting president. So on the backdrop of Trump's inauguration, his victory really, they wound down the cases, and Jack Smith resigned. Out the door, he decides he's going to file a report on the dismissed case. Mm-hmm. So he, I guess, wants to create this last shot over the bow. This last, let me set the record straight on what would have happened to Donald Trump in this case had he not won the election.
Right. And he's saying I would have won. I
would've won.
You know,
Shocking.
Surprising.
Shocking.
I mean, and if you read the report, the you know, if you reduce it to its most to its essence, he's basically saying, well, listen, we had proof of Trump's intent.
Right.
You know, but really? I mean, I don't know if that's. Listen, I thought the case was a danger to Trump and that a jury would convict him, but not necessarily because they should have convicted him.
Right. You thought it was a danger because of, as you said, where it was.
Right.
Who was doing it, and what judge. And
intent is a slippery concept.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, as you know, I mean, in law school, it's like it's here, it's there, it's everywhere. You know.
Well, the thing, and you made a point, and just we didn't want to really get too much into the meat of the case because the case is over.
Yes.
But you made a big point, and the point that I always made, and if anybody wanted to hear me, and usually just myself talking, so and listening, they never charged Trump with insurrection.
That's correct.
It's considered the insurrection case. We have a big fat insurrection statute in the federal penal code. It's big and it's fat and it's there. And when the case was referred by the J6 Commission, and when Smith was assigned as a special prosecutor and he was delving through all the information, there is nothing he wanted to do more than to charge Donald Trump with insurrection, and he could not. Why do you think he didn't charge him?
Well, the proof wasn't there. I mean, you have proof of intent, but you have proof of counter intent. So I think he was trying to bring the most doable case, the strongest case. Right. And that's not unexpected. I mean, trying to reach further, the whole case might have collapsed. Trying to say if it's insurrection, it's not insurrection. Even a jury that's biased against you, then if they believe you're snowing them on the top count, they could just wipe the whole thing out. Absolutely. I mean, that's been known to happen.
Absolutely.
But if you keep
that's what happened in Daniel Penny, by the way.
Yes, of course. Yes, that was a bad tactical mistake, and the jury just went the opposite way the prosecutor thought they were going to go.
That's okay.
And this happens. But all things being equal, I thought that on the charge they did bring, there was a very fair chance of conviction.
Yeah, I think and this filing the report is just a nothing burger. You know, if you go on now, everybody's glued to all of this, right? Everybody's had the thirst for information. It's just Trump derangements, and whether you're for Trump, against Trump, it's everything Trump, Trump, Trump.
It's all Trump all the time.
That's right. Trump vision, Trumpy bear, Trump watch, Trump sneakers. But I'm getting a kick out of, no matter what channel you turn on, the way a lot of these legal pundits are talking about this report as though it's a conviction. They are saying, see that? You see that? They would have convicted Donald Trump would have been convicted had he not delayed and delayed tactics, and Merrick Garland's no good. He's the worst of the worst. And they're hanging everybody for not pushing forward with the case sooner to get Donald Trump convicted before the election. He never would have won. He would have been doing life in jail, and it would have been gone, and he would have been gone and out of sight, and life would have gone on very nicely for the liberal woke mob.
No, but it wouldn't have been. I've often said that Donald Trump actually tamped down what the Republican victory should have been 2 years ago, and this year it would have been a tidal wave.
Right. So you believe if somebody else,
if Nikki Haley had been there or whoever.
Yeah,
I think it was the electorate was primed for that. But, you know, Donald Trump's negatives kind of tamped it down a little bit. Otherwise, the Senate, I mean, you could even be closer to filibuster-proof Senate.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know if I completely agree with you on that, but maybe. But, you know, there's a point to be made and an argument to be made for it. But getting back to the analysis on the Jack Smith report, the credence it's being given is ridiculous. I mean, the bottom line is Jack Smith procured a 46-page indictment. An indictment, probable cause, no defense, majority, no unanimity. You know you can, as they say, indict a ham sandwich. Yes. And now he filed a 140-page report about the indictment saying my indictment was absolutely going to convict him. Not defended, no jury verdict, unopposed. I mean, enough already. Yeah. Any lawyer that wants to really tell the truth and not being a biased blowhard is going to say, what did you expect Smith to say? And who cares? We don't care. The case is over.
Yeah.
And it's
And
enough is enough. Enough is enough.
there's no such thing as a response to the special counsel's report.
Right.
I mean, contrast that to the special counsel's report on the Biden case.
That's right.
Which I think was like a short report.
Robert Hur. They submitted.
There wasn't really much to report on.
Wait, what?
That's the guy who interviewed Joe Biden and said that he was a well-meaning man who doesn't remember anything.
Right. There's no right. I mean, they really don't want to prosecute a guy because I really can't pull his intent out of him because he's out of it.
He thought it would be elder abuse.
It's insane. Right, it's insane. But you're exactly right. So that's the contrast.
I mean, what the Bidens did, and I'm talking about the whole Biden family, and they call them the crime family. There's a lot there, and between you and me, we should just bury it at this point. I mean, it's silly. I mean, Hunter Biden's going to go away. Joe Biden's going away. There's no more Bidens.
I disagree with you, and I'm not that I'm a big fan of lawfare. I'm not saying that Pam Bondi, who should be, I don't, even though she's dealing with the typical filibustering, I don't call it filibustering, but the typical objections.
She'll get through. She'll be the Attorney General.
I don't even think Donald Trump, and I said this to you a few times, I don't think he's going on a witch hunt.
Yeah.
I think there will be legitimate inquiries into everything. The lawfare, the collusion between Alvin Bragg's office, Fannie Willis's office, the DOJ, wherever there is wrongdoing and violating laws and violating ethics, I think people should pay the price. Now, as far as we talk about the Biden crime family, the reason why Joe Biden and his family, if they broke the law, need to be brought to justice, is because you need an entire mob of Biden support that they've run interference for this family for a lot of years. If, in fact, there is criminality, if there was pay-to-play schemes, bribery, public corruption, they should pay. Somebody's got to pay the price. Maybe Joe Biden is long gone by then. Maybe he goes off into the sunset and nobody hears from him, and he spins the globe and he looks for a non-extradition country and he goes to move there. I don't know. But somebody or somebody's need to answer if laws were broken. So we shall see.
However, we end up in an endless cycle at that point. And I think that if Donald Trump wants to be the president in his mind that he believes himself to be, maybe it's time to, yes, bring some light onto that, but just bring it out into the open and then just leave it be.
Oh, I agree. No, well, shed light on it, but he doesn't have to be he's not going to be he can't be like he did with Hillary, lock her up. We're not doing that this time. Let his people that are in charge of the various agencies do their job. And if anything is there, it's there. If you want to be magnanimous and say, listen, it's here, it's in black and white, but I'm going to encourage that the people in charge of bringing people to justice, just for the sake of unity and to not continue with this perpetuous warfare.
I'm just afraid, you start looking like a third world country where every president goes to jail like down the line.
Yeah, listen, we're not at you're right.
Like being the governor of Illinois for many years,
but not if there are facts.
Every one of them.
I mean, you're a third world country if you create facts. You're a third world country if you prosecute for the sake of prosecution.
Yes, I get that.
I mean, you could be magnanimous, sort of knock them down, and then in the spirit of unification, you pick them up, dust them off, and say you made a mistake, but I just want to move on.
Right. I mean, that's Gerald Ford when he pardoned exactly Nixon. Right. He says, for the good of the country. I mean, there were people who had a bloodlust for Nixon. They wanted to see him like incarcerated or like dying, and it's a terrible thing. Ford just tamped it down and said, hey, wait a minute, best interest, let's move on. Let's move on to something else. Cost him the election probably, but I think he did the country a great service by doing that.
I agree with you. And Joe Biden, he channeled his inner Gerald Ford when he blanket pardoned his son. Yes. He said, you know what? I think the language in the Ford pardon of Nixon, where he said basically, by all means, fair and unfair, pick a period, you never did anything. Anything you did in these 5 years, you're good. Joe said, you know what, Hunter? Anything you did in these 10 years, you're good.
Well, because, you can't. But, of course, now Hunter Biden has no Fifth Amendment privilege if he's called before a government committee.
Exactly.
At this point. I mean, he can't be prosecuted for it. So, so they're going to hold him in contempt?
Right.
He'll do 30 days.
That's right. Exactly. He can't plead the fifth. Right. He could. He'll just keep doing a series
in perpetuity.
He could face a perjury rap, and he could also. And I said this to you. I mean, if listen, we see what local DAs can do if they want to meddle in stuff that should be in the federal purview. But if you get some local DAs, local AGs that want to make a name, and they're all looking to make names for themselves.
Of course they are.
He figures out a way to bring Hunter Biden in on state charges, maybe banking charges, where corporations were filed and created that Hunter used to funnel ill-gotten gains through. You'd have jurisdiction at that point, and if you want to make a name, you'll bring sort of like the way Fannie wanted to make a name and the way Alvin Bragg wanted to make a name. You get some local DAs that want to make a name by hanging Hunter Biden.
It would have to probably be somebody in a red state doing that.
Yeah, you would think exactly.
I don't think anybody in Delaware is
I
going
don't know.
to bring charges against the Bidens.
We've got a lot of red states these days, and you have a lot more red counties these days. So who knows?
It's true. It's true.
We shall see.
Yep.
And they're not the sharpest tools in the shed either, and you don't need a sharp tool, as you can see.
Speaking of the pardons,
yes,
the Biden pardons.
Yes.
I mean, boy, what an eclectic bunch that was.
What is he doing? I mean, he I can't believe he's pardoning God. He actually commuted sentences of murderers. Yes. Murderers.
Yes.
Guys with bodies.
Yes.
What is that?
that shows your political career is over when you do that.
I mean, come on. I mean, going out the door. But what's the point? What's the?
I don't know.
What's the message?
The one that really got me was he pardoned that judge in Pennsylvania.
Oh, with the
who was
the
part
kids.
of the scheme where they was in I forget the county, Lescombe County. Yep. I forget what the name is, where they every kid who came in, no matter what the thing was, ended up in a juvenile facility.
In a facility. A juvenile.
And the juvenile facility paid bribes to get this done.
That's unbelievable.
That is such a perversion of justice that it would be unbelievable that guy wouldn't do every day of that sentence.
That is disgusting. That is disgusting.
I'm not sure where that pardon came from. That one's out of the blue. I mean, see, that one should be investigated because there might be some money changing hands on that. It's the only way I could figure that one occurring.
I can't think of one human being in the public sector that would actually want to attach their name to that kind of. What's the upside? Who would want to attach their name to that pardon? This judge ruined the lives of so many kids. That's almost sacrilegious. Short of releasing pedophiles, and he did release a child porn guy or commuted his sentence, but short of releasing pedophiles,
yes,
pardoning pedophiles, this is almost arguably is an egregious crime, and he let the guy out.
Yeah.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, what that judge did was essentially a slap and a kick to the justice system.
It's unbelievable.
And I just cannot figure it out.
And the mainstream media is totally silent.
Yeah,
How much water do you want to carry for this guy?
Yeah, they reported on it when it happened.
Because it happened.
Yeah, but where's the outcry?
Imagine
on
Trump
that
doing
one?
something like that.
Oh my gosh,
it would be, and rightfully so. They chase him over the countryside.
Yeah,
and rightfully so. But that was disgusting. He's lowering the bar. You and I had conversations. You and I spoke maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I asked you, is there any chance that the pardon power of a president somewhere in the immediate future is going to be revisited by the Supreme Court, by SCOTUS, through some sort of case that starts or some sort of investigation? And you said no, you believed it was beyond reproach. And I agreed with you.
It's in the Constitution. We have to change the Constitution, which, can happen.
Well, maybe
you need a large consensus on that.
I know. But stuff like this, I mean, no president coming in wants to play around with the pardon power. That's a tremendous power, even on the state level, with governors having the ability to do that. We do need that. But when you get some abuses that are blatant abuses, I'm not even talking about Hunter's blanket pardon. Who cares? It's his son. Who cares? I'm talking about the judge. I agree with you. That judge was it jumps off the page for some sort of review. Mm-hmm. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah, I just because you cannot overturn the pardon doesn't mean the pardon can't be investigated.
Right.
And I think that cries out for an investigation. Where did that come from?
Right. And it's disgusting.
I mean, my first inclination is bribe. There has to be money. Because,
you would think.
Yeah.
What's some of that
What's
money?
The impetus? From referring it to the that scheme may have found its way back. Why would you do that?
It's disgusting. Listen, pardons are prevalent. They're part of the executive branch, and we mentioned a guy before We mentioned Steve Bannon.
Yes.
And Steve Bannon was the subject of a Trump pardon in 2018. He was pardoned for what he's now being tried for in state court, New York State, actually New York City. The guy that we spoke about, shockingly, Alvin Bragg, has Steve Bannon under indictment. Trial starts next month for a set of facts and crimes that the feds were dabbling in back in 2018, like I said, and Donald Trump stepped in, pardoned Bannon, feds disappeared on it, and of course, Alvin Bragg picks it up. What's your feeling on the case?
Well, people may think that that's inconsistent, but we have a dual system here, federal and state, and they exist simultaneously. And there's something called the double jeopardy clause in the Sixth Amendment, where you can't be brought in jeopardy of life and limb for the same offense twice. And you would think in this such a circumstance the facts are exactly the same, but it's not the case. You have two different sovereigns here, and if they had acquitted him, if a jury had acquitted him in the federal case, and the federal and certain facts were determined by that, perhaps there would be a double jeopardy argument in the state court. But he was pardoned.
Right. So what you're saying is if the facts were settled in one jurisdiction, they couldn't be dug up in the other.
Well, it depends on what the facts are.
Right,
yeah. There's Supreme Court precedent for applying facts, applying theories, whatever the case may be, to see if it may spill over. But in the case where you pardoned, you just took that case off the table like it never existed. And now, of course, the state can step in. Now, the question is, why is the state stepping in?
Well, it's Alvin Bragg, and that's what I was alluding to. You know, Alvin Bragg never met a Trump supporter he didn't want to hang. So Steve Bannon, one of the loudest of them all, finds himself in Alvin Bragg's crosshairs. So what's that case about?
After having served some time for contempt of Congress. Well, you know, what does the case have to do with the wall? I mean, he was raising money.
We Build the Wall was the corporation, non-for-profit formed.
That's correct. And there's the allegation is that it was a scam, and he and other people pocketed the money.
Right.
You know, I don't know the details of it.
Yeah. So let me just throw a few things at you because, I got a little bit more familiar with it the last few days because a friend of ours, a lawyer who we know, Arthur Idala, has now taken on the representation of Bannon moving forward.
Good choice.
Yeah, Artie's great. So Arthur Idala, you know that if Steve Bannon has any chance of success, Arthur Idala is going to make that happen because he's the best of the best, and he's here in New York, good friend of ours, and obviously we're rooting for him, and we're rooting for fairness. But getting back to the case for a minute, one of the things about the case that I found, and getting into the facts for a moment again, just to regurgitate. It's $20 million is raised by Bannon and a few people through this non-for-profit called We Build the Wall. It was about privatizing the building of the wall, some pieces of the wall. They built a few miles of the wall, and they ran into trouble because it's a private company, and you're going to run into logistical trouble when you're doing things that the government's supposed to be doing.
Yes.
They had permit problems, they had environmental issues, they had to shut down. As it turned out, some people made money. They had a veteran that was heading. He was the I don't want to call him a front man. I was about to, but he was the president.
He was the guy up front.
He was the upfront guy.
Okay.
He was the not-for-profit chair, and he supposedly wasn't going to earn a dime. He wound up pocketing a few $100,000. He took a plea. He got convicted. Two other guys got convicted. They went after Bannon.
So the guy who made $100,000 took a plea, and the guys who made $20 million didn't.
No. So there's a few guys that took pleas. So I don't know the numbers. I didn't do the math yet. I guess a decent amount of money went into whatever they built. They built a couple of miles, but it looks like Steve Bannon's not accused of actually putting money in his pocket. That's the uniqueness of it. It seems as though after going through the books and records, the prosecutor had to change his theory. They're still accusing him of defrauding, but they're saying he defrauded more for the benefit of others than for himself.
And that's a valid legal theory.
Yes, it is. It is.
Although it's counterintuitive in many senses.
Right, but there's a uniqueness to it. So you want to hang the guy.
Well, the question is, what did Bannon know?
Right.
I mean, what kind of proof do they have?
Right.
Did he know these people were making money?
Right.
I mean, and why wouldn't Steve Bannon take some of that for himself?
Exactly right. So he's taken nothing. They're not accusing him of that. They're accusing him of just being part of this scheme to defraud. But he's going to have Steve Bannon's going to have, despite having a wonderful lawyer in Arthur Aidala, he's going to have the same basic problems that anybody in the Trump orbit is going to have in New York City. You're dealing with a very liberal jury pool, and you're dealing with a predominantly liberal Democrat judge.
Now, I'm not super familiar with the jurisdictional basis of that case.
Neither am I.
How did it end up in New York?
Right. I don't know.
I mean, that's the first thing they teach you in law school. Are you in the right court? Is there a claim being stated?
Right. So district attorneys, and what Dominic is saying, for a prosecutor to bring a case in his or her jurisdiction, he has to have what's called subject matter jurisdiction, meaning the basis for the commission of the crime, the act and or acts, either all or in part, took place within the boundaries of that county or that city.
Right. There's something called territorial jurisdiction among states, and then there's also something called geographical jurisdiction within the state. Right, county. The question, Manhattan is very famous for claiming that the banking system clears all these checks in Manhattan, and therefore, if a check is written, they have jurisdiction. And the courts have kind of like said yes, but they dance. They find alternate reasons for jurisdiction. Maybe this is a way we can finally put that to rest, because Robert Morgenthau was famous for bringing that theory. Hey, it cleared through the Federal Reserve. Where's the Federal Reserve? It's in New York. All right, therefore we have jurisdiction.
Well, also, Morgie had a way of, every judge was afraid to say he didn't.
Well, yeah, aside from that, yeah.
Robert Morgenthau, for people who don't know, was the DA in New York County for a long, long time, and he had a reputation not unlike J. Edgar Hoover.
Yes.
And he had a file on everybody.
That's correct.
Friends and foes.
That's correct.
And it was just his file, and you didn't want to be the file that got pulled out.
Yeah, and for example, when Rudy Giuliani was the mayor, the only person he ever backed up from was Robert Morgenthau. When before he was elected mayor, he went to a police rally and was exhorting the police to do stuff. It sounded kind of like what the same Trump did in Washington years later. But Morgenthau was investigating, and you could tell there was a lot of silence in the Giuliani camp. They knew that Morgenthau was the only guy you had to
Morgie was, he was a political animal.
Yes.
He was a hack and a half, and that was some dangerous office he was in.
Yes.
And when you mentioned the time, the fact, and when you're talking about Giuliani, when he was the Southern District.
Yeah.
He was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, by all accounts, the most powerful federal district in the country, and he was worried and afraid of Robert Morgenthau. He went around them and not through him.
That's correct. That showed a lot of respect and fear.
That's right.
But Morgenthau was the one. His office came up with this banking theory, which I find, I blanch against it. I think it's total nonsense.
So speaking of Rudy, right? So our assessment.
Rudy's back?
Rudy's back. So we think Bannon's in good hands with Arthur Aidala. The case will unfold. He's in a tough spot in terms of the jurisdiction. And, of course, the facts of the case is still, for me, I'm not sure why he's even, what they're saying he actually did or pocket. If you didn't pocket any money and you want to hang the guy, you kind of have a jury that's going to want to know what was in it for Bannon.
Well, listen, in those kinds of cases, those false pretenses cases, a lot of the time the money's taken and nothing's done.
Yeah.
And that's proof of.
That's proof enough.
Yeah. But if you move forward to do stuff, but you fell into
partial performance.
Yeah, and you fell into a problem, generally they instruct the jury that they have to acquit on that. So
this should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, all things being equal, if Bannon didn't get $1 from this and the wall was completed and they really tried, all things being equal, a fair jury should acquit him.
Yeah, and we got to see. And I don't know if the guys that took pleas are they flipping on him. I don't know any of that. Now that Artie's on it, they put the case off for about 6 weeks. Maybe who knows what's going to happen after that. We'll get a clear picture on what the defense is and what they're saying. But let's talk about our guy Rudy, because Rudy is in the news not because he's America's mayor or he's afraid of Robert Morgenthau, but Rudy's in the news because he has a $150 million judgment against them from that wonderful jurisdiction, D.C. Circuit, federal court. 2 Georgia election workers said that Rudy defamed them, made their life miserable by going on television all those times when he was talking about election fraud and identifying them as 2 scoundrels stuffing ballot boxes on behalf of Joe Biden. They sued Rudy. They sued him in D.C., the D.C. Circuit, D.C. federal court. And not shockingly, Rudy got a $150 million judgment against him.
Well, I think Rudy conceded liability in that case.
He did.
Because they asked him for documents and he wasn't producing them, so they finally just said we're going to concede liability. But I don't understand that. But
did you see what the verdict was made of? The money was comprised of. They got $20 million apiece for emotional distress,
right?
And then $75 million in punitives.
Yes,
that's a lot of shekels.
I don't even know. Did that case ever make it up on appeal?
I think it's still in the process. I'm not even sure.
He filed bankruptcy, which kind of.
Right, but he got thrown out.
Because obviously the verdict seems excessive.
It's ridiculous.
Because I mean, let's say Rudy did
what he did.
Yeah, defame them.
Right.
And he might have. I mean, it looks like it might be. What's the damage? I mean, what kind of reputation?
Oh, their actuals were nothing. The damages are all. They had no. The emotional distress is what they got the big money on, and the punitives, which is you and I know, that's to punish the defendant. Right. It doesn't have a rational relationship necessarily to the status of the. But victim.
Usually the punitives are done in a proportion to the actuals. The case versus what's the case? BMW versus Gore. The U.S. Supreme Court established a proportion for punitive damages, and the only reason why I know all about that case is that I had a federal verdict reduced because of that.
Because of that.
BMW, yeah. So,
I remember you telling me that.
Yes. It went from 317,000 down to like 85,000. Because of the actual damage component was not great, and then there was a multiple, and the court said
and also they take into account the defendant. If you had a deep pocket defendant, you're gonna get hit because they want the punitive to impact the guy, the culprit, so to speak.
I was thinking that if the case ever made it up on appeal, I would think the appellate court would cut that verdict down. The problem is, I think Rudy filed bankruptcy, and it's been kicking around.
The bankruptcy was thrown out, though.
Right.
So that's over with. So now whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Yeah. But he's 80 years old. They want to sell everything on him.
His underwear,
apparently his underwear. He's got signed underwear, all sorts of stuff. They want to
signed by who? That's the question.
I think that's what makes it more valuable, and I'm afraid to ask. So they wanted to sell his World Series rings because the Yankees gave him World Series rings. He was a big Yankee fan all the time. His condos and anything else he owns.
He had it was a BMW owned by Lauren Bacall. It sounds like Seinfeld.
It's insane. And they have his son. So Andrew Giuliani, he was a very nice young guy. He's an attorney. Andrew he promised to and is being held to by the court, be the guy, the custodian of Rudy's jewelry, which includes the Yankees rings. And he promised that he will hold them pending the outcome of the case. So Rudy wouldn't go self. So, I mean, America's mayor, one of the most popular mayors in the history of the country because of what he did with 9/11 and his being front and center at a tragic time. He is going out, both out of his career and at the end stages of a fulfilling life. He's going out tarred and feathered. What a shame.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I mean, Rudy is exactly what you see. Yeah. I mean, if you meet him in person, but I think this was all mishandled on his part.
Terrible. It was.
Listen, he might have made a mistake by making those accusations against those people. Fine. Mistakes happen. Courts deal with that. But I think this got out of hand, and now he's, everything he owns, they're trying to take from him. And everything he does, the courts look at with a doubt in their eye.
And he's running around, and
he's trying to establish residence in Florida. But they're saying, no, you're not.
You're not a Florida resident. Right. He's not, and they're very strict.
But he already signed over the condo in New York.
And the judge told him to be quiet, shut up, gag order, and he's running around screaming. She's held him in contempt twice. She's threatening to throw him in jail.
But he's been held in contempt in New York and Washington.
Yes, he's sort of like he's almost become
like a walking contempt,
and he's unhinged. He's become like a guy that's just going out of his mind. He's got, if you're Rudy, if you had, and I happen to like Rudy, we've met him a few times. I met him a few times.
Yeah.
My brother ran for state senator back in the mid 90s. Rudy was the mayor. Rudy came out to support him. And like you said, he is who you see.
Yeah.
What would you say to him right now?
I would say to him, listen, you got some bad advice here. We got to maybe try to roll this back a little bit.
Take a chill pill. I think that, and you and I know this, when you start showing deference to the court and humility and remorse, and you say, I should have known better, I was supposed to know better, it goes a long way.
It does. It does.
And going out like a gangster is not the way to go.
No, I know. And if you're looking like you're hiding assets and you're making, off the cuff statements that sound kind of weird.
Right. And this isn't a criminal case. He can't get a Trump pardon on this.
And
this is him.
Some of those judges, they have it in for him.
Exactly.
He's giving them fuel.
What comes around goes around, and he's got to be careful. He's not. I think he's very haphazard. So I'm hoping he slows his roll and like you said, I hope these awards get reduced to some reality, because I think these women do not deserve a fraction. They deserve a fraction, if at most.
Yeah, I mean,
it's insane.
There's a reasonable sum in there.
That's right. So
and I don't know if they were how they would goad it on, and he should have just settled it at some point, and said, "Hey, listen, if you're admitting liability, you can't let it go to a jury verdict. You got to say, hey, listen."
He's all over the place,
and you get the court involved. Say, hey, judge, we're offering X amount of dollars.
And he's on social media. He's an 80-year-old guy doing his own social media by all accounts, and he's blasting the judge. He's still blasting these women. He's on Twitter tweeting. This social media is dangerous.
Tell me about it.
You can't take it back.
Yeah.
I mean, and speaking of social media, it's forever. That's right. It's speaking of social media being dangerous. Apparently, the federal, our government, thinks that TikTok is extremely dangerous.
Yes.
And
TikTok, it's about to explode.
They've got 4 days. On January 19th, a bill that Joe Biden signed, a law that Biden actually signed, goes into effect, and TikTok will be banned from the United States.
Now, but TikTok has said that they're gonna just take their ball and go home, and they're not gonna play ball anymore. Yeah, apparently.
I don't know.
I don't know if I believe that, but
I don't know. But the status. So very briefly, here's where that is at. So TikTok is facing a ban come January 19th. I think midnight January 18th.
The question is, what is a ban?
Okay, so here's what the ban is. Interesting. Yeah. So the ban is that TikTok the app can no longer be downloaded in this country. But if you already have the app downloaded, you have it downloaded. But you won't be able to get updates. So, they're always updating all the time. So the app will become obsolete.
Right.
So you have 150 million TikTok users in this country who will no longer be able to update their apps, and there won't be any additional apps being downloaded. So TikTok says, according to their argument, because the case is in front of the case is in front of the Supreme Court. They're challenging the constitutionality of the law, as you would know they would. So they're in front of SCOTUS, and a lot of questions that are being asked seem to lean. And you and I both know, you could tell by questions asked and then the way judges answer which way they lean. Not all the time, but most of the time, which way the case is leaning. And a lot of people think that the case is leaning towards upholding the ban. And as of January 19th, TikTok will be gone and will cease to exist in this country in terms of updates, and will just fall by the wayside.
That's the start of the slow
death.
Be
obsolete.
Slow death, yeah.
Slow death. So here's the twist in this case. And of course, just another little bit for a moment, the whole premise is TikTok is owned by ByteDance. ByteDance is a Chinese company, has a lot of connections to China, the government, as any company does. And apparently the feds, when they filed their information, their proof, their evidence on why TikTok needs to be banned, it was so sensitive, security-wise, it's under seal. The evidence is under seal.
We really don't know.
You really don't know. So it's a public case, but the evidence is private because it's so sensitive.
Yeah, well, just using logic, it's got to be the account information,
right?
And whatever other information, and maybe tracking, as it is with all sorts of, things Facebook has done.
That's right.
Twitter, they're all the same.
So here's the interesting twist. So some external forces at play. This is not just the case in front of SCOTUS. That's clear. That's what it normally would be. This is also appeals have been, not appeals filed, but appeals have been made to Joe Biden to kick the can down the road, delay the January 19th
Right.
date.
To the 20th.
To the, well, not even, to let
To let Trump
it
do
be
it.
somebody else's problem. But funny how that is that Trump filed paperwork. The Trump administration coming in filed paperwork. They're not a party to the action. It has no weight other than
The day later, we're in charge.
no. But here's what he said. His paperwork says, "I now," because Trump was against. He was against TikTok back about a year and a half, 2 years ago. He now likes TikTok because he's realized that he says TikTok was actually valuable in his election.
Getting him elected, yes.
There was a lot of it reached a lot of people. It wasn't as big. I know we know we have some issues. We have evidence. I mean, spying issues and obviously China's a very dangerous foreign country. But we also have, listen, they buy our property. We let them buy our property. We let them fly spy balloons across our country. Yes, they're all over the place, and this is they're a problem. But Trump said, and I quote and I paraphrase, he said, "Give me 90 days to broker a political deal. I can get this resolved." Because it's not about TikTok. It's about who owns TikTok.
Yes.
If ByteDance divests themselves.
was owned by the British.
Right.
You know.
If Elon Musk or Kevin O'Leary's trying to buy it, if somebody bought TikTok, that there was no country conflict, there was no communist ties.
So he wants to roll it into the tariff fight?
Well, that's funny, and that's kind of the conversation. Use it, you make a deal, talk about, you know what? You divest, I won't do this, we don't do that. And he's trying to he wants to make a deal as opposed to have a law go in effect. How do you feel about that?
I mean, that's Donald Trump. I mean,
100%.
for sure. But
let's make a deal.
But you know what? It's the ultimate practical solution because really, isn't it all political? I mean, despite whatever's happened with sensitive data, if a deal is brokered, that would solve the problem, wouldn't it?
That's exactly
you would think. And probably would smooth over some of the problems than not having TikTok. Because you have a whole generation now that works with that. I mean, they make money off of that. They get entertained by that.
Right.
So, by doing that, you're actually there's a dent in the economy at that point. There's going to be an economic effect from that.
That's right. You have a lot of users. Now, you have 150 million users.
Yeah.
You have about 220 million users in this country of Facebook, about 100 million users of X, formerly Twitter, and somewhere in the middle of those numbers is Instagram. So the second law, we are, because India is always number one.
Yes.
Because this,
always, of
for
course.
obvious reasons, because there's so many people. But we are the second biggest TikTok market. So if you're ByteDance, which is controlled, which owns TikTok, controlled exclusively, I don't care who they put up for it. They do also have American representatives here. They have people.
Yes.
Their company has an office here. It's got people. I don't know about a CEO, but representatives. But this is all the Chinese government. And whatever that sensitive information is that they have proof that they're using the subscriber information, whatever that is, it is. But to your point, if you're the Chinese government and ByteDance has this inherently huge value financially, isn't there a way to work something out where you don't lose that equity?
Of course there is. Of course there is.
Right? You divest yourself. You do what you have to do to satisfy
Trump
the
is
security.
seeing it as a business deal for among countries, which may be the right way to look at it.
Right. So the only way this is going to happen, because SCOTUS isn't in the deal-making business. SCOTUS has a job to do. They said they're making a decision on the 19th. The only way they don't make a decision on the 19th is if the government, representing the party that wants the law upheld, if the government backs up and delays it.
But couldn't the Republican Congress sit down and reverse that?
Yeah, sure.
And then Trump
because
sign
it's
off
their
on it?
law. Just
It is.
reverse. Sure.
But the thing is, I don't know what the willpower is among the Republicans, aside from Trump, on doing that. Because I think they went along with it last time.
Well, there's something in the law, though. So and you're right. There's something in the law which basically says this isn't forever.
Yes.
That at any given time, we could revisit this.
Yes.
So even if you're banned today. If tomorrow you make a deal, you're unbanned.
Right.
So it's one of those. It's one of those, in my opinion, to use a layman's phrase, it's one of those. What we're going to do is we're going to kick you to the curb. We're going to knock you on your ass. We're going to rattle your cage, and maybe in 48 hours you'll come to your senses and divest yourself, and then we'll welcome you with open arms. So it's almost as though the law is more for lighting a fire up their ass than actually wanting to ban TikTok.
Yeah. It may be built for negotiation. You're right about that.
Right. So what Trump is saying, you're built for negotiation. Let's stop the pomp and circumstance.
Biden was looking for the angle where he can get in there.
Right. Well, he already thinks he's already taken credit for the Hamas ceasefire, because he really believes that after a year and a half of not releasing American hostages, that he's out in 3 days, and they're afraid of what he's going to do. So they made a deal. The ceasefire was done because Joe Biden is the president and Tony Blinken is the Secretary of State, and they are going to rain hell on.
It's kind of like a Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Iran hostages.
Exactly right.
The minute Reagan was elected, the Iran says, "Can we make a deal?"
Right. But a couple of days ago, Trump said he was very clear. If by the time I'm inaugurated, there is no ceasefire and the hostages are still being held, they will be held to pay. And he walked away. And I think that's true. The only thing is, this ceasefire is not. I'm not so clear as to all the provisions of it. I don't think all the hostages are being released. I'm not so sure. But whatever it is,
we shall see.
We shall see. And whatever it is, you could rest assured, the impetus for it was Trump coming in, not Joe Biden going out. Anyway,
before we go,
yes,
one thing.
Go.
In honor of Donald Trump being sentenced,
yes,
and now being a convicted felon,
yes,
Frank, I'm putting it out to the world, I'm offering it to Donald Trump to join us in our Sophisticated Felons Club.
Yes, you and I.
Remember the Sophisticated Felons Club?
I do.
We formed at Franklin Correctional Facility.
We did.
That was the place where all the convicted lawyers, accountants, doctors were all sent, and we kind of gathered them up in a little group, and said, "Don't be afraid, we're here."
That's right. CEOs of stockbrokers,
investment bankers,
right. Boiler rooms,
psychiatrists.
Yes.
Yeah, boiler rooms. So we formed something called the Sophisticated Felons Club, which and for membership, you have to have done a sophisticated felony that doesn't physically hurt somebody.
Here's the problem, though.
Sex offenders need not apply.
I would love to let him in, but doctoring a business record is not so sophisticated.
Well,
we can make an exception, though.
Yeah, but the problem is then you might have to let Michael Cohen in.
No, I would.
But I'm offering it to him.
I want to let Michael Cohen.
We'll send you a T-shirt. We'll send you a hat.
Michael Cohen, I would love to let Michael Cohen in because we're going to send him for coffee every day.
Yeah.
He's going to be the coffee boy.
Yes, but wouldn't Donald Trump like to wear the SFC hat?
You know what? We're going to put it out there, and maybe in the not so distant future, as this podcast takes off, he'll join us in the guest chair and explain to us.
Yes, exactly.
Whether he takes us up on our invitation, or he shuts us down and sends us to China.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, Dom, this is the beginning of the beginning. It was great. We're going to go through all of this, and maybe every week, every couple of days, every week. We're going to have a wonderful time. It was a wonderful show. Always good talking with you. And there's a lot of news. Till next time. Talk to you soon.